Some people never become poor all at once. They become poor quietly, politely, almost invisibly, while still earning, still smiling, still telling everyone they are trying their best. And the most dangerous part is this: the habits destroying their future often feel normal while they are happening. By the end of this, you may not just see why some people stay broke. You may recognize a pattern in your own life that has been asking for your attention for years. Because poverty is not always a number in a bank account. Sometimes it is a way of thinking, a way of delaying, a way of spending, a way of protecting the ego while the future slowly slips away. The gentleman cat once sat by a rain-covered window, coffee growing cold beside him, watching people rush through the street below. Some were dressed in fine clothes, some carried expensive bags, some looked successful from a distance. But he understood something life teaches very slowly. Looking rich and becoming secure are often two completely different journeys. Have you ever met someone who always seems busy, always has plans, always talks about what is coming next, and yet somehow never moves forward? That is where this begins. The first habit that keeps people poor is spending to be seen. Not spending for need, not even spending for joy, spending for proof. Proof that they matter, proof that they belong, proof that they are not behind. A better phone than they need, a car they cannot comfortably afford, clothes chosen less for comfort and more for silent competition. It rarely looks dramatic. That is why it is so powerful. A person buys one thing to feel respected, then another to maintain the image, then another because their new identity has become expensive to feed. And slowly, money stops being a tool and becomes theater. This is where psychology enters so quietly. People are deeply influenced by social validation. We do not only want comfort, we want signals. We want others to look at us and think, they are doing well. But when your life is built around signals, you begin sacrificing substance. And here is the cruel twist. The people you are trying to impress are often too busy trying to impress someone else. So everyone is performing, and almost no one is secure. The gentleman cat would ask, very softly, what is the true price of an image that must be constantly defended? Not the price tag, the real price. The sleep, the pressure, the debt, the silent panic each month. Many people are not poor because they earn too little. They are poor because too much of what they earn is spent on other people's eyes. The second habit is treating every emotion like it deserves a purchase. A hard day becomes food, stress becomes shopping, boredom becomes scrolling and ordering, sadness becomes another small reward. This is how the modern world trains people without them noticing. A little discomfort appears, and immediately the mind whispers, "You deserve something." And for a moment it feels true. That is the dopamine loop. Not evil, not mysterious, just powerful. You feel low, you buy. You feel a small lift, so your brain remembers. Next time pain arrives, it offers the same answer. Again and again, until spending is no longer a decision. It becomes emotional reflex. Have you ever bought something you did not need, only to feel strangely empty when it arrived? That is not because you chose badly. It is because you were not trying to buy the object. You were trying to buy relief. And relief bought in moments of weakness is usually expensive. A woman once said she did not understand where her money went. She worked hard. She was not reckless. She did not gamble. She did not live wildly. But when her week was examined honestly, the pattern appeared. Small comforts, small treats, small escapes. Nothing shocking, nothing dramatic. Only a quiet river of emotional spending carrying her future away one gentle purchase at a time. Poverty often enters through tiny doors. The third habit that keeps people poor is refusing to learn what money is actually doing. Many people would rather feel temporary peace than face uncomfortable truth, so they avoid checking balances, avoid budgets, avoid statements, avoid difficult conversations, avoid math that might expose their habits. This is not laziness alone. Often it is ego protection. If I do not look closely, I can still pretend I am managing. If I do not count the damage, maybe the damage is not real. But life does not reward what we avoid. It charges interest on it. The gentleman cat believed that clarity is one of the highest forms of self-respect because the numbers on paper are not there to shame you. They are there to free you. What ruins people is not always lack of money. Sometimes it is lack of honesty. A man can speak confidently at dinner, give advice to friends, post ambitious ideas online, and still be quietly terrified to open his banking app. That is not a money problem first. That is a truth problem. And truth, avoided long enough, becomes fate. The fourth habit is waiting to feel ready. This habit has destroyed more futures than failure ever did. Some people wait to start saving when they earn more. They wait to learn skills when life becomes less busy. They wait to apply, to build, to invest, to change, to begin. As if readiness is something that arrives like good weather. It rarely does. Most meaningful progress begins in imperfect conditions. A cluttered mind, a tight budget, a small room, an uncertain plan. The people who change their lives are not always the boldest. Often they are simply the ones who stop negotiating with delay. Delay feels harmless because it comes dressed as logic. I'll do it next month. I need more time. I need the right moment. I need more confidence. But many times what people call preparation is really fear wearing respectable clothes. Have you ever noticed how the mind can invent brilliant reasons to avoid one important step? That is not coincidence. The brain wants safety more than growth, and poverty loves hesitation because every delayed decision gives it more time to settle into the furniture of your life. The fifth habit that keeps people poor is staying loyal to environments that are draining them. This one is painful because it involves people, not just numbers. Sometimes the costliest habit is remaining in circles where bad decisions are normal. Friends who mock discipline, family patterns built around chaos, workplaces where exhaustion is admired but growth is not rewarded. If everyone around you is impulsive, responsibility starts to feel strange. If everyone around you spends emotionally, restraint feels lonely. If everyone around you complains but never changes, action begins to feel almost offensive. This is why environment matters so deeply. Human beings absorb standards from the rooms they sit in, not through lectures, through repetition. What is laughed at, what is praised, what is ignored, what is normalized. A young man may know he should save, build, learn, and plan. But if every weekend pulls him back into the same wasteful rhythm, knowledge alone will not rescue him. This is where social validation becomes dangerous again. People would rather remain accepted in a familiar circle than become misunderstood in a better one. So they protect belonging, even when belonging is expensive. The gentleman cat once said that some doors do not lock from the outside. You stay inside because leaving means becoming a different person. And that is what many people fear most. Not struggle, transformation. The sixth habit is confusing income with wealth. This is one of the oldest illusions in modern life. A good salary can hide terrible habits for years. As long as money keeps entering, people assume things are fine. But income is what comes in. Wealth is what stays, grows, protects, and serves you when life becomes difficult. A person may earn well and still be one emergency away from collapse. One job loss, one illness, one family crisis, one bad quarter, and suddenly the illusion breaks. Why? Because they built lifestyle faster than they built stability. This is loss aversion at work in a very human form. Once people become used to a certain standard of living, they fear reducing it more than they fear the long-term danger of sustaining it. So they keep stretching, keep borrowing, keep upgrading, keep saying yes to costs their future self may not be able to carry. It is a strange thing to watch. People will fight to preserve comforts that are quietly suffocating them. They will defend the very pattern that is making them fragile. And if someone questions it, ego steps in immediately. I work hard. I deserve this. This is normal. Everyone lives like this. Yes, and many of those people are anxious too. The seventh habit, perhaps the deepest of all, is making peace with victimhood. Now, this must be handled carefully because life is not equally easy. Some people begin with more support, more education, more safety, more opportunity, and some begin with burdens they did not choose. That is real. But there is a line between acknowledging difficulty and building identity around helplessness. Once a person becomes emotionally attached to the story that nothing can change, they stop searching for exits. They stop experimenting. They stop learning. They stop taking responsibility for the part that is still theirs. And this is where cognitive dissonance appears. A person says they want a better life, but their daily habits protect the identity that keeps them where they are. Because change is not only practical, it is psychological. To become different, you must release certain excuses that once comforted you. And not everyone is willing to lose those excuses. They may be painful, but they are familiar. There is a dark comfort in saying, "This is just how life is." Because if that is true, then you do not have to risk effort, rejection, discipline, or failure. You only have to remain the same. But the same has a price, a quiet, accumulating price. The kind that shows up years later when someone looks around and realizes they have become a spectator in their own life. Now here is the part many people do not expect. These 7 habits are rarely obvious while you are living them. They do not arrive wearing signs. They arrive disguised as reward, convenience, loyalty, patience, identity, and self-protection. That is why intelligent people fall into them. That is why hard-working people fall into them. That is why even kind, capable, disciplined people can still remain financially trapped, because the trap is not always outside them. Often it is hidden in daily behavior that feels emotionally reasonable. A man says yes to status spending because he fears being overlooked. A woman avoids her finances because she fears what the numbers will say about her. A worker delays learning a new skill because exhaustion has drained his belief in tomorrow. A dreamer stays in the wrong circle because loneliness feels heavier than stagnation. And piece by piece, habit by habit, a future gets negotiated downward. So what breaks the cycle? Not shame. Shame rarely changes people for long. What changes people is honest awareness, followed by small, repeated acts of self-respect. The day you stop buying things to feel seen. The day you learn to sit with emotion without paying to escape it. The day you look directly at your numbers and refuse to romanticize confusion. The day you act before you feel ready. The day you outgrow a room that has been shrinking your mind. The day you choose stability over appearance. The day you stop using pain as proof that growth is impossible. Those days do not look dramatic from the outside, but inside a life, they are revolutions. The gentleman cat would never tell you that changing your life is easy. He respects you too much for that. He would only remind you that many lives are changed not by giant opportunities, but by repeated private decisions nobody claps for in the beginning. A different purchase, a different routine, a different conversation, a different boundary, a different hour in the morning, a different response to discomfort. That is how a person slowly stops feeding the very thing that has been feeding on them. And here is a question worth sitting with tonight. If someone watched your habits for 30 days, not your intentions, not your excuses, not your potential, just your habits, what future would they predict for you? That question can sting, but sometimes the sting is mercy, because the life you want is often hiding behind the patterns you defend the most. Maybe this is not about being poor only in money. Maybe it is also about being poor in patience, poor in discipline, poor in truth, poor in standards, poor in courage. And maybe real wealth begins long before the bank account reflects it. It begins the moment a person becomes too honest to keep betraying themselves. There is something very powerful about a human being who stops performing and starts rebuilding. Not loudly, not for attention, quietly, steadily, almost invisibly. At first, nobody notices. You spend less but think more. You speak less but act more. You compare less but build more. You impress fewer people but disappoint yourself less. And over time, the entire emotional structure of your life begins to change. Because wealth is not only what you own, it is what you can delay, what you can resist, what you can understand, what you can keep, what you can walk away from. And perhaps most importantly, wealth is the ability to make decisions from calm rather than desperation. That is why some people with modest incomes become stronger each year, while others with far more remain trapped in quiet panic. The difference is not always talent, it is often habit. Small habit, repeated habit, unquestioned habit. So if any part of this felt uncomfortably familiar, do not turn away too quickly. That discomfort may be the first honest voice your future has sent you in a long time. Listen to it. You do not need to repair everything tonight. You do not need a perfect plan before sunrise. You do not need to become someone else in a single week. You only need enough courage to stop calling harmful patterns normal, because once you can name the habit clearly, you are no longer fully under its control. And once you are no longer hypnotized by it, change becomes possible. Slowly, yes. Messily, yes. But possible. One day, perhaps sooner than you think, you may look back at an older version of yourself with a strange mixture of compassion and disbelief. Compassion, because that version of you was trying to survive in the only way they knew. Disbelief, because you will see how much suffering was being repeated in the name of comfort. And on that day, you will understand something the world rarely says out loud. Most people do not lose their future in one terrible decision. They lose it in 7 habits they practice so often they stop noticing them at all. Notice them. That is where freedom begins. And once freedom begins, even quietly, poverty has already started losing its hold.